Hello, this Writing 2 presentation is about our proposal project, specifically the implementation section. As far as following along, I'm going to be real honest here. Our book really doesn't get into the idea of implementation, which is unfortunate because that's a really important thing. Our book is more focused on an academic paper than it is on this type of writing that we're getting into, at least for this section. But we are going to reference various ideas that do come from the book here and there. So what is the implementation section? Well, we're going to really talk about how will the solution happen. In the previous section that you wrote, you considered what the solution will be for a problem, or what will it look like if we take advantage of this opportunity, right? And now you're going to talk about the practical steps on your pathway to change. You're going to consider the time needed for each step. You're going to think about who's responsible for each step. You're going to ask what steps are needed to get this approved, if we need to pass this by a board or something. And you're going to think about the financial decisions and the steps needed for that. You're also going to think about how you will measure success in the future. So as you get started on the implementation section, I recommend that while I do have a sample outline that has some of these things in it, this presentation fleshes those out a bit, and you may want to revisit especially this first page when you go to write your implementation section. With implementation, you're really talking about the how. How is it going to get done? You're shifting from ideas and concepts in your earlier sections to the gritty details. Now, you do want some concrete details in earlier presentation. Got into that in earlier sections. But really, this is where you're going from, here's an idea, here's what we should do, to, okay, how are we going to do it? And this is going to provide the information that decision makers need to approve the solution. So focusing on details will be a big part of this. So let's put this pretty simply on what implementation is going to look like. You're going to describe the sequence or steps needed to deliver the solution. So let's get into an example here and talk about what we mean by a pathway to change. Let's say you're a local animal shelter, and this is an example from the examples list in the instructions page. So you're an animal shelter and you want to put in a cat room, and in earlier sections you've described why that would be an awesome opportunity, and or you've talked about the need for it. Maybe you noticed and people noticed that the cats were having a hard time. Maybe you were having a hard time getting them adopted because people were depressed by how they saw them cooped up. Cats need to walk around. They need to be social. You have all this research about why this is a good idea, right? So then you've said, well, the solution for this is a cat room. So we're going to make this cat room, and in your solution section, you read details about what's going to go in your cat room. And you've got your, scratching posts. You've got these little climbing things. And even talked about, we could have a window where people could look in and see these cats and see the cats happy, and then choose which cat they want to look at. You've got these great ideas for the solution, right? Well, now it's time to actually say, okay, how are we going to get this done? Well, we're going to need to renovate this room. Maybe we're using an old office room, and we can move somebody out into more of a general area. But we're going to need to renovate this room and put in a window. Maybe it had carpet or some other tile. We want it to look a little nicer, so we're going to put new flooring in. We're going to then, procure, or that's a fancy word. The government uses the word procurement a lot. We're going to procure or get, find, buy, whatever, these cat toys and things like that. These, little furniture pieces for cats. These are the steps we're going to use to find them. We're going to get donations from local pet stores, or talk to people who support us and ask them to go out and purchase these things and donate them to us. We're going to raise money and pay for a renovation, or we'll get a local company to volunteer their time and give them a lot of free publicity or something. These are all ideas that you can kind of hash out, and I'm happy to help you with these. But we want to think about these steps and, how are we going to go along the pathway to change? Of course, you're going to think about who's responsible for these steps as well. Are you going to rely on volunteers to help you if you're a nonprofit organization? If you're a company that's making money, who in your organization is going to do this? And that could get a little sticky for you. I understand, because you may not be at an organization that does this. Again, this is where I can come in. And again, we don't need this to be 100% accurate all the time. I can help you if it's something you've got an idea for how things can happen at Ancilla College. But, we can make stuff up a little bit for this project. That's fine. In this implementation area, we can be a little bit fast and loose with the facts and come up with something that seems pretty true. I'm not going to, go out and track down your research on this particular section, because I know you're maybe not working with everything that you would if you're actually working at a place. So just do the best with this as far as who's going to do it, but at least come up with some kind of an idea, right? And who might be in what position would take care of this. Another quick example from the business world. Let's say you're a small company. Again, another example that's on the topic sheet, and you've already made the case that your company needs to move forward with better, more modern marketing tools. And maybe the things that you've done okay, but you need to expand them. You need to rely on more than just advertising in the yellow pages, which not very many people use, perhaps in your mind. Maybe you've done the research and realized there are a lot of people who never even look at yellow pages. Some of you out there listening may not even know what a yellow pages is. And again, newspapers, is that really an effective way to advertise? The placemats in restaurants, maybe you're limited on that. So you're a small company and you want to start advertising on social media. Okay, so what steps are you going to take to do that? And who's going to do it? Well, you're probably going to need to find somebody to do it. Is it going to be the owner's nephew who needs a little extra cash? In the case that I'm kind of thinking about a little bit is my in-laws used to run a salvage yard for used cars, where people would come and get used auto parts that they could fix their own cars, and occasionally maybe even buy a used car that they had worked on there. So again, they wanted to do a lot of stuff on Facebook and social media and start a website. So my wife and I worked on that. We just kind of volunteered because we benefited from being able to get car parts from them and have them work on our cars. So again, that's just one example. You might also think, wow, we really want to do this more professionally. In Ancilla College, we've done that with marketing. We've hired somebody who does marketing for us, but we've also hired outside companies to do special projects. And you can find some of these if you need ideas for something like this, for social media or whatever. Come talk to me. I know people in the community. I have a lot of ideas that I can help you with this, and hopefully this helps you not just. One tool you should use when showing the steps is a timeline tool. This basically shows the time needed for each step. And I've provided a real simple example here. And what you're seeing, if you look at it, is you'll see the date when they're working on a certain part of the project, and then what the actual activity is they're working on, and then who's responsible, personnel. In this case, the student had an idea. This is from a technical writing class that I've taught in the past, and the student's proposal was on developing a certain app related to like it was an app related to a TV show. So you can see the steps here, and you can see that this is fairly easy to read. And again, we've talked about considering your audience. Your audience likes things to be laid out in a really straightforward, efficient way, and they can see the different steps this way a lot more easily than they can, say, in a paragraph form. Now, you often will want to provide more details on all these steps elsewhere and explain what's going to happen actually in these particular different activities and all the different spots along your timeline. And you can have a much longer timeline than this. I chose one that was fairly short for putting in this presentation in an easy to read way. But you could definitely do something a lot more detailed than this, and I'll be posting some more examples on our Brightspace that are a little bit more developed. Sometimes to make the changes that you want to make, you need to go through an approval process. With this particular project, you're going to want to think a little bit about this. I'm not going to get hung up on this and really push the issue on you. But I do think this is worth considering, and for those of us who are moving forward in professional and academic careers, we definitely want to be aware of this. Within your organization, there are decision makers. That would be the internal. External are decision makers outside your organization. So for example, if I want to start a brand new class, a brand new literature class that I've been dying to teach, I have to get approval through some committees. That might be people within my division, other English professors, and then wider in the college, I would go in front of something called academic council that I'm a member of. If you think about how government works in a House of Representatives at the state level, or even at the federal level, even in a city where they have a city council, they might have smaller committees. And so you might have an idea that's a bill about, we want to pay teachers more or something, and that would start off in a committee, and they would work on that a little bit if they need to, cut things out, add things to it, and then if they would approve it, it would go on to the larger House of Representatives, Senate, whatever. And then on to the executive level, right? The president has to sign off on that, or the president can veto it. In some organizations, you have to do that with a board. That's the case with the college. Some of the changes we might want to make would have to be approved by our board. There are also sometimes external agencies that would be over this as well. So for example, if we're talking about the Marshall County Humane Society cat room, there may be government agencies that have to give approval for any significant renovation, especially for a nonprofit that might get money from the city or from the county to deal with a stray pet population or whatever. There might be the health department may have to approve something for if you're wanting to expand your business to include a restaurant or something like that. So again, I'm not going to get really super pushy with you on this, but it's something to think about. I put accrediting agencies on there because sometimes for nonprofit and especially education, if you want to make a change, you have somebody who gives you approval that kind of oversees a lot of different colleges or a lot of different programs, make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. So again, as you're considering this, just put some thought into it. Again, I'll probably provide some ideas as you start putting your topics forward, and we'll work on it together. Your implementation section should also include any financial steps. This is going to show that you've actually considered what your organization needs to invest, and this also helps show that it's feasible. In other words, the plan is possible, it's doable. I highly recommend including some sort of a budget table, and there are a lot of different types and examples. I'll post a few different types and examples and templates that you could even copy and paste into your own project for use. I've put one here that's a real basic one. This might refer to like the podcast club example that we've talked about and is on our topics list of examples. Here you have the item, which would be some microphones. You have the cost, $50, quantity, that's 3 microphones for a total of $150. That's pretty straightforward math. You can get really in depth with this if you want to, and I would encourage you to put some thought into the materials needed and the cost for these and do some research on that. Provide some really good content for this section. That'll also show whoever's reading this in your audience that you've really put some thought into it, and that's one less step they have to go through. Again, this will show that this is a feasible plan. As you're working on the project for this class, I realize some things will be easier than others. So the example that we had about the problems on 9B Road with people speeding, let's say that you come up with this idea of doing speed bumps. That may be tough to research. Well, how much does a speed bump cost? Well, you'd have to really talk to the county, and then you're getting into county approval, and that's all well and good. Definitely steps you can put in there. You may have to sort of estimate for this project. I am not going to independently research and call you out unless things are completely ridiculous. So if you are trying to, for example, start a sports club for some new sport that we've had, and you say that we need a $5 million stadium, that's probably low end of stadium, maybe I'll say, okay, maybe that's not so feasible, and maybe a stadium would cost a lot more than that. I don't know. I'm not going to make you work through all the steps, though. So that may factor into, for your readers, hey, we're going to have to build a $5 million stadium for some sports club. We probably aren't going to approve this. You want to think through that, and that's what the implementation section is for, is to help think through this and say, okay, for example, at Ancilla College, when they started lacrosse, they realized, well, we don't really need a new lacrosse field. We'll share the field with the soccer team. And as a result, there might be some finances for different markings you would put on the field. I'm not entirely sure. But they saved a lot of money that way without having to clear out a whole nother section and cut down trees or whatever else like that. So thinking through those steps does show that you've thought about how this can actually happen. A really good idea for your implementation section is to talk about how you're going to measure success. Earlier in your document, you've talked about what the problem or need is, right? And you want to be able to tell your audience, the people who might have to approve this, how you're going to know when that problem is solved. Sometimes this is easier than others, and there's a whole field that we can get into and really dig deeply into this. But let's keep it pretty simple. How are you going to know if you've solved that problem? So if you're working on the problem that people speed up and down 9B Road, and we put in speed bumps, or we station a security officer, or whatever solution you come up with, how are we going to know this is effective? Well, we can take surveys from the people who walk back and forth and say, have you noticed a difference? That's certainly good. So have somebody stationed out there at certain busier times of the day and actually watch and pay attention. And they can watch and pay attention before we put the whatever in, and then pay attention once these things go in, and even, a few months down the road once people are more used to it. And document, okay, we solved that problem. We're not having this problem anymore. This is awesome. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit tougher because maybe you don't completely solve the problem, but you do know things are better. So you're going to have people write reports. Maybe that's all you put in your implementation is, we're going to study this down the road, and we'll have an independent committee study to say if the problem is solved, and they'll come up with something. You want to be a little bit more specific, but you can say that. For an opportunity, you might have to say, okay, when are we going to know that we are successful? For example, with the podcast club idea, how are we going to know that this is successful? Well, when they are regularly putting out podcasts, and maybe you would say, when we have X number of students join this club, or when we have regular podcasts coming out. Maybe with the cat room example, you would set a goal for, okay, we know this is going to be successful. Again, maybe we'll have surveys and get comments from the people who visit here and are looking for cats if they think this is working really well and how they might think it would work even better. Maybe we track how many cats are adopted, and if the number of cats being adopted goes up, maybe it's not 100% the cat room, but we can certainly say we think that it helped, right? So find ways to measure success. You can do that in a couple of ways. You can consider benchmarks, which is how you're starting out before really the plan is implemented. You can have milestones. You can say, by the end of this month, we'll be in this place. And 6 months down the road, we'll see these results. You really want to do this because people care about accountability. Whether it's decision makers that are executives at your company that want to make money for your company, that's a normal, good thing to want profit. They're going to want you to be accountable for the company making a profit on this plan. If you're a taxpayer and some of your money goes to a government agency, you want them to be accountable, and you want accountability. We see this coming into schools and education, sometimes in ways that are a little bit inappropriate. The idea of wanting accountability is good. So you want to show your decision makers that you are willing to be held accountable for this implementation and solving what you really want to solve, or taking advantage of this great opportunity. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope this presentation helps you as you work on your implementation section, both for this project and as you are successful in whatever endeavors you have in the future.